Welcome to Faces of Fleet, an interview series from WorkTrack, where we take a more personal look at the fascinating people in Fleet and explore the experiences that shaped them. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Vice President of Content at Bobbit, and today I'm thrilled to chat with David Ronson, President of Acela, Inc. David's career spans emergency preparedness and response, entrepreneurship, and inventing custom solutions that address disaster response challenges. From high water rescue vehicles to mobile morgues, David has worked to innovate and address some of the most pressing needs in emergency situations. Let's dive in and learn more about David's incredible journey.
For this month's Fleet News, we have one more recommendation for you. That's because Dave Slade, Chevron's chief technologist, sat down with FreightWaves to talk about the lower carbon journeys of their fleet customers. It's a great conversation with insights into today's solutions and tomorrow's targets. You can find the full episode in the resources at regi.com.
Welcome, David.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Can you share a little bit about your background and how your career in emergency response evolved into founding Acela?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I started my career in the late 80s with CAL FIRE as a firefighter, and moved on from CAL FIRE, became a private contractor to the Forest Service and the Department of Interior. So my firefighting career spanned about 17 years. And somewhere in there, I started building custom trucks. We actually cut our teeth building custom brush trucks or wildland fire trucks. So I've been at that now for, I think, a little over 30 years. And have been involved in some really, really cool projects, building everything from fire trucks to mobile command centers, mobile medical clinics, bookmobiles, buses, and a lot of other custom vehicles as well.
I love it. As an avid reader, I love seeing bookmobiles on that list.
Bookmobiles were some of my favorite. Fire trucks and then bookmobiles.
So, as you noted, you worked as a firefighter with FEMA as an emergency manager. What was some of the most challenging or memorable experiences from those roles that shaped how you're approaching disaster response today?
I think when I was a firefighter, it was a much more forgiving time. I think people had more patience. People were much more appreciative for the response or the level of response that they got. Resources are very, very limited. And what I've seen change over the years is, and take the LA fires for, as a great example. Not only is there just a ton of ridiculous misinformation out there, but I think that a lot of people, whether it's in response to a hurricane, a flood, a fire, an earthquake, they expect that somewhere behind some hidden curtain are tens of thousands of responders that can just be there the next morning. And so some of the biggest challenges that I faced in my career were, being one of the earlier responders or even being one of the first responders to a very, very large scale event, and then just waiting for reinforcements to show up and being able to, get a handle on the incident and actually start making some significant progress and providing great service to our customers.
What inspired you to focus on designing custom vehicles and solutions for emergency situations, such as your high water rescue vehicles?
Well, turns out that my late father must have had quite the impression on me because he was a designer and engineer. I didn't think I had it. I was dead set on becoming a firefighter from the time I was about 17 years old. But I realized after I left CAL FIRE that I had a bug to design, and that effort just fit very well with specialty vehicles, but especially emergency response vehicles. I mean, my passion is providing solutions into emergency services, and so far it's panned out pretty well. We've been able to build some really cool solutions and help a lot of first responders out there.
When I was doing some research before our call, I learned about Paladin as a division of Acela for addressing mortuary surges, and it was a really unique niche. What led you to identify this need, and how did you go about creating solutions for it?
I would love to claim responsibility for the genius behind Paladin, but I cannot. So rewind to, I think it was March 2020 when companies were getting shuttered, right? Lockdown was happening for COVID. Our current product, we remanufacture a very specific military vehicle, primarily for first responders and fire departments and sheriff's offices for rescue purposes. I remember there was about a 1 or 2 week period where we got phone call after phone call after phone call from our vendors telling us that because they were not considered to be essential workers, their plants were getting shut down, or they, for whatever reason, couldn't supply us with parts. And to be perfectly honest, I was very, very concerned whether or not we were going to make it, because we're a production facility. If you can't feed the monster, things are not going to work. The monster being the production line. And I was concerned. And one of our clients at the time, a client that we had great relationship with, is the Veterans Administration Office of Emergency Management. And our sales director, Louise Rainoni, came into my office, and she knew at the time I didn't like doing a lot of custom work. And she said, look, just hear me out. The VA wants us to build 56 morgue trailers. And I had, in a previous life, also built refrigerated vans and refrigerated trucks. So I was very familiar with the equipment and who the vendors were and what would be involved. And we put together a bid spec for them. We bid the job. We had competitors. We were awarded the job. And we delivered, of the 56 trailers, if I recall correctly, we delivered 45 of them within 35 days after we were given the contract. So we completely retooled our production floor, completely ran out of parts for our trucks, so we would not have been producing trucks. And they were absolutely thrilled. And so those went to 56 hospitals around the country. And word got out at the time, right? This is in the thick of COVID. Medical examiners and coroners around the country were having a hard time figuring out, well, how do we store bodies in a dignified manner and in proper temperatures? And we grew the Paladin division over the years. I guess it's been almost 5 years now, to one of the country's only medical grade morgue trailer and morgue storage solution manufacturers in the country. So it's still a very, very strong business for us. I think COVID was a real eye opener for the hospitals, the coroners, the medical examiners' offices, that they really needed to be more prepared than they were during COVID. And so aftermath of COVID is there was a lot of, and there continues to be a significant amount of COVID or preparedness dollars out there in the form of grants, and we're still selling trailers, and out of that exercise grew a product called Cube. So it's a very portable morgue. It breaks down into a very small product that can be stored, let's say, in the basement closet of a hospital or something like that. And when they need it, it takes about an hour to set up, and you've got a portable morgue as opposed to a trailer that's got to sit outside. So that is the story of Paladin. Like I said, still a very, very strong division of the company.
That's absolutely fascinating. And what a way to pivot in a time that nobody really understood what was happening or what the end results were going to be, and a way to really help the community at a time that was really needed as well.
Well, it's been, again, this was a fluke on our part, right? A fluke that we had an established relationship with the client, a fluke that we had a background in building refrigerated vehicles. It really was, very, very good timing and honestly, a lot of luck on everybody's part. I don't think the VA would have gotten the trailers built by anybody else that I'm aware of. But along the way, personally, I knew nothing about how a coroner operates, or how a medical examiner's office operates, or how hospitals deal with mortuary solutions. And so we have helped now hundreds and hundreds of organizations throughout the United States. And it's very satisfying. I mean, these are, we call them last responders, but these are a very, very, very dedicated group of people who have really impressed us quite a bit. So it's been fun. It's been rewarding, and here we are. Right, our production line is back up and running. Knock on wood, and we've done well with it.
Well, as someone who's been both an inventor and an entrepreneur, what's your process for identifying these challenges in disaster response and turning them into these practical, patented solutions?
When I look back throughout my career, I've never wanted to copy anything. I've never had any desire to build another widget. I've always, where I've succeeded the most is finding a need and finding the most simple solution to resolve the requirements of the need. And so, I've been very, very lucky. There's a lot of mad scientists out there that come up with all of these mediocre to great ideas, but most of them don't have the capacity to actually realize how that might work in a real world environment, what the challenges actually might be, or how to actually develop it into a product successfully and bring it to market. And so I have been very fortunate in my career that, I'm a mad scientist, and sometimes I'm a squirrel and and I look at shiny things. But I've been very fortunate to be able to kind of connect the dots a few times anyway, successfully, and actually bring products to market that work. And I really, really, really employ a KISS method. Keep it simple, right? When I'll give you an example. When we built mobile command centers, this was, post 9/11, where the buzzword in the market was interoperability, right? So this all came from FDNY radios couldn't talk to NYPD radios. And all of a sudden, congressmen jumped on that and said, no, we need interoperability. Every agency in the United States needs to talk to each other. And whether or not that statement is true or founded at all, is debatable. But what happened was there were hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars granted to first responders for interoperability. And that was interpreted over the years as, I need a mobile command truck. I need a $5 million mobile command truck. And so these dollars flowed for years and years and years. And we got into building mobile command centers kind of at the tail end. But our niche in the market was we built very, very low budget mobile command centers. And the way we did that is we gave the end users every single bit of the capabilities that they were getting with these $3, $4, $5 million trucks. But we actually gave them a solution that a cop or a firefighter can walk in and use. And the biggest complaint we heard from most of our competitors' end users were, if Bob's on vacation, nobody knows how to use any of this stuff. We don't know how to connect. We don't know how to switch the video from this screen to that screen. And by employing that KISS method, we developed some very, very sticky clients that still come to us today, asking us for solutions. So,
As a part of that, I know innovation, it often requires collaboration. Can you share how working with teams, whether in emergency response or as a part of your business, has helped play a role in your success?
Yeah, I like buy-in. I think as part of that, and I'm not trying to paint myself as this wildly successful guy, right? I've brought several successful products to market. Um, we are very proud of them. But collaboration is absolutely paramount, right? If take that mad scientist example that I gave earlier. If you're a mad scientist and you're working in a box and you've got your blinders on, and all of a sudden one day you pop out of your hole and you say, "I've got it. I've got the perfect solution." I guarantee if you didn't have a group of end users, a group of production people to tell you how to build this thing, right? All of the people that need to be involved to bring your product or your solution to fruition, then you don't have a product and you don't have a solution. And so I look at it, I look at that process kind of like some people call it the Swiss cheese method, right? I invite people that I trust to poke holes in any idea and any product that we're developing or wanting to bring to market. And so, case in point, we are in the process of bringing a new product to market right now. I can't talk too much about it, but it is a huge game changer in the wildland fire truck market. We're very excited about it. And we're talking right now with some of the largest potential end users, some of the fire truck manufacturers that might have an interest in it, production people, engineers, right? They're all involved at some level to give advice on, what options do we want to offer? What standard equipment do we want to offer? How big does this need to be? How small does it need to be? How much power does it need? All of those sorts of things are taken into account as we're designing, as opposed to coming to market with, "Hey, we have this finished design for this thing. What do you think?" Well, not much. We wish you had called us, at the beginning and asked us what we thought about this or that. So, yeah, collaboration is huge. It is very hard to operate in a box and come out with something that your end users are really going to be able to use, out of the box.
You've been involved in disaster response on both local and national levels. How has your perspective on preparedness and response changed over the years? And how do you see it starting to evolve in the future?
I think my answer probably has mostly to do with what I commented on earlier, right? I think that there's this crazy expectation of not only first responders, right, the most local resources to a response to a call, whatever the call may be, but also the secondary and tertiary responders, and then all the way up to the federal level. I think people's expectations of maybe not their local fire department so much, but certainly in a large scale incident, right? Or a growing incident, or a new incident, or an evolving incident. Again, take the LA fires as the most recent, great example. There are just all of these resources, right over the hill, and they're just going to show up. I think people's expectations of FEMA particularly are completely warped. FEMA has never been, and it was never intended to be, an agency with resources that jump, onto the ground and fight fire, or, clear water from floods and, that sort of thing. FEMA is a backup agency that was designed to support the local, county, and state resources. They serve a support function. Last time I checked, FEMA's entire full-time staff consisted of, I think, under 2,500 people. Well, considering that they respond for years at a time, right? Off the top of my head, I can't think of a fire or a hurricane from 5 years ago, but I guarantee you they still have hundreds of people local to that incident still working on reimbursing the state or reimbursing homeowners or business owners. So, it's a very long-term response to an incident. It's not, hey, we're going to jump out of airplanes tomorrow and get everything fixed immediately. So, you can see it. The current administration is clearly very frustrated with FEMA. I think that our politicians, our leaders, have the ability to affect the way other people perceive these different agencies or firefighters, right? Another example is turn on the valves to get the water to Southern California. And I don't need to elaborate on that, but amongst everybody that I know that fights fire in California, and I just had a great conversation with a great buddy who's an active firefighter in California last night, and we had a good chuckle about the valves and getting water down. So I think it's just perception. There's only so many resources. I've met very, very, very few firefighters in 30 some years whose heart really wasn't in to what they're doing and wanting to respond and wanting to provide the best customer service that they possibly can. But boy, when you show up to a fire and you're one engine crew or one hand crew and there's 100-mile-an-hour Santa Ana winds and you're just getting your butt kicked, there's only so much that you can do. So, I think perception is everything. And then on top of that, people don't want to pay for it, right? Right or wrong, I know nothing about LA County or LA City's fire budget, but what is coming to light, at least from the department level, is, hey, we're understaffed, we're under budget, we don't have enough equipment. And you hear that from around the country, right? If even, Bobbitt has published many articles about, cities like Chicago and Detroit, they have, in some cases almost more fire trucks particularly, but more apparatus in an out of service status than they do in service. So, all of these things compound first responders' ability to provide great service, and we all want to.
I think that leads perfectly into my next question. So clearly, we're in the face of growing climate challenges, from fires to hurricanes. Disasters happen every year. What advice would you give to fleet professionals or businesses looking to enhance their emergency preparedness capabilities, especially in the face of the challenges today?
On a very personal level, I recognize climate change, right? I'm not an expert. I don't know why climate change is taking place. I don't know if it's human caused, but the fact of the matter is it's happening, in my opinion. I believe, we're located in Bozeman, Montana. I think we're in a pretty resilient place. But I'll tell you, we're starting to sell flood rescue trucks much faster and in much higher quantities than we were a year ago and 2 years ago. And there's no question that is a direct result of climate change. And we have communities, now approaching hundreds of them that are getting 100-year floods every single year. And in some cases, we've got one client in Texas, they're experiencing 100 and 500-year floods twice and 3 times a year now. And that's year over year over year, right? There's no, hey, we had this hiccup and everybody's, exaggerating about what's going on. So, I don't know that I can answer your question from a first responder standpoint. We're already seeing them respond, at least with that one product, right? With flood rescue trucks. When we introduced our flood rescue product, and here's a great example of what we were talking about before, we tried to push the product. We tried to push our chassis as a flood rescue truck, and nobody really got it. And we're going back like 7-8 years ago now. So nobody really got it. The only flood rescue trucks that I'm aware of that existed in the United States were generally very, very, very old military trucks. And most of them were out of service or nearly out of service, or at least very unsafe. And finally, we made the decision, okay, well, let's build a flood rescue truck and we'll bring it to some of the trade shows and we'll see what the reaction is then. And I can tell you that 3/4 of the firefighters that walk these trade shows would laugh. I mean, we would literally be sitting in our trade show booth, not crying, but, how could they not get this? They would just laugh. Oh, I wish we can have one. I mean, our trucks are huge, right? So when you're standing next to one, you can't help but to, think, wow, I mean, this is a monster truck. That sentiment, and they just couldn't figure out why somebody would need a truck like that. That sentiment has changed 180 degrees. We literally are having trouble keeping up with orders. And the reason for that is a direct result of climate change, or at least changes in the local climates to these particular departments. And, what these departments have learned is, if you want to really upset a fire chief, have a flood and let him take his class 1 pumpers right to the edge of the water and then give him no resources to help his community. And you're going to see budgets change. You're going to see inflatable boats. You're going to see high water flood rescue trucks getting budgeted for. And, again, going back to these first responders are passionate about being able to provide customer service. And we're seeing that tool set change and dramatically and very, very fast, right? I think we built that first flood rescue truck only, I think it was 7 years ago. And the difference in 7 years has been night and day. So we're very proud of the product that we build. Most of the flood rescue trucks serve at least dual purpose. Most of them have a very, very large, slip-in type unit in the back, upwards of 1,000 gallons in some cases. So, our trucks do, serve dual purpose, right? So they can replicate themselves as either water tenders or very capable brush trucks and things like that. So other than that, I don't know. I don't know what advice to give a business or a department other than, again, there's clearly a division line, at least within the United States, as to whether or not climate change is real or not real. You don't have to call it climate change, right? Just call it flooding or hurricanes or earthquakes or snowstorms or whatever the case may be. And there's no question they're getting more severe. So, if anything, just preparation.
As we wrap it up, David, as someone with such an incredibly diverse background and impactful career, what motivates you to keep innovating and keep finding solutions for these challenges in disaster response and beyond?
My passion is supporting first responders, first and foremost. We build trucks for a myriad of different vertical markets. I mean, we're in the mining market, we're in oil and gas, we're in pipeline, we're in utility. All of these crazy vocations and crazy environments, and I've been in many massive open surface mining environments, and it's fascinating. But designing tools and improving tools for first responders is definitely my passion, and I think that passion has really spread through our organization. And we pride ourselves not only on the development of the product, but also after sales support. And so, we provide great after sales support to all of our customers, but, particularly when a fire department, or in some cases, especially on the East Coast, a lot of sheriff's offices are responsible for rescue versus fire departments. So we work with a lot of law enforcement as well. We bend over backwards to try to find solutions, very quickly. So yeah, easily, hands down, first responders are the thing that keeps us going and motivated.
David, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and insights with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Lauren.
For anyone else interested in more episodes of Faces of Fleet or Truck Chat, check out the links below. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and comment below to let me know who I should be chatting with next. Be on the lookout for more episodes of Truck Chat, where I'll continue to focus on the people and the topics that matter most to work truck fleets.